Hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. We're going to appease those of you that are fans of the Wisconsin Badgers and the Big Ten today, as we're going to be joined by Brian Butch. He does a tremendous job over at the Big Ten Digital Network. He's an analyst for the Badger Radio Network. I know he does some work over at Fox Sports and so much more. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be chatting with him about the offseason that the Wisconsin Badgers have had. I need to bring this up with them. The fact that it does feel like things have become a little bit more top-heavy out there in the Big Ten. I feel like the Michigan schools and the Illinois are sort of the creme de la creme, and then it's a little bit of a fall from there, so we'll take a look at that. We will take a look at more of those mid-tier teams. We'll talk about whether or not Nebraska can continue what they did last season and so much more, so we've got a great two-part chat here with Brian coming up. I would round up the news and notes of college basketball, but really it's a very, very dead transfer portal right now, and with it being Father's Day weekend, happy Father's Day to all of you guys who are listening out there. Not a lot of guys were making decisions, and most of these rosters are relatively packed, but as we do get those news and notes, I will certainly be getting you guys those, and if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in those Twitter/X questions, because that lets me know what you want to hear on the podcast, and makes the offseason go by a little bit faster as well, and you guys are going to be getting great chats all throughout the offseason, and keep in mind, I'm going to be doing my conference previews for all 32 conferences as well, and a conference as near and dear to Brian's heart is the Big Ten, so we're chatting all about that and so much more, and Brian also does a great job with his YouTube show. You want to go to that is the letter at, sort of like the symbol, Brian_Butch32 for that wonderful show. I believe it's called Butchie's Den, and you're able to follow Brian on Twitter/X at his first name, Brian last name Butch, and then the number 32 all together. And Brian, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always great to have you aboard. And Brian, we are both men from the great state of Wisconsin. As a matter of fact, the Appleton area. So it's fitting that we do start there. And for the Badgers, I think that it's fair to say not necessarily the offseason they were hoping for, because you lose John Blackwell. He's probably going to have an absolutely incredible season over there with the Duke Blue Devils. I know that they lost a few guys with regards to recruitment, especially the gentleman from Freedom within the state as well. But how do you take a look at the Badgers for this upcoming season? Because they didn't necessarily make a big amount of splash moves in the transfer portal or anything like that, but they do have some retention from last year's NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, and I think that was their biggest thing, Greg, when you look at this Wisconsin team. Obviously, they wanted to rely on their front court. So they go ahead and they get Nolan Winter re-signed. They get the Aussie, Big Austin Rapp re-signed. I think those are all really big parts of what they wanted to do. When you look at this group in general, Greg and staff said, hey, our front court, our front line has to be for sure. I think when you look at what John Blackwell made at Duke, or reported numbers, that's a good chunk of Wisconsin's budget. Wisconsin could have paid John Blackwell, but then Wisconsin couldn't have retained Austin Rapp, Nolan Winter, Jack Janicki, Hayden Jones. And at that point, now you're looking around saying, okay, is one player equal to the 5 players I just named? And I think every coach would probably say, no, it's not. I'd rather have a nucleus back that knows what we're about as a team. And I think that was the decision that Greg and his staff had to make. I do like the addition of Owen Foxwell, the guard from Australia. He's a pro. He's been a pro for a while. That's where college basketball operates. He's the guy that knows how to get things together, run a team, make sure a team's in the right set. I think, Elmer from Miami of Ohio, I expect him to be really, really good with this team as far as the way that he shot the ball, almost 36% from 3. Trey Autry, a really solid player from George Washington, another guy that you look at him and say, okay, he can help be a big guy off the bench, maybe a Braden Carrington type feel of what they just did. And then they've got Victory from Hofstra, which is a different thing than what Wisconsin has ever really had. And I think that's the interesting thing about this, Greg, is he is a straight rim runner, rim protector, dunker, and that is it. Most of Wisconsin's bigs have been stretch bigs. Victory is not that. He is a guy that's going to go to the rim, block shots, really be extremely active in what he's doing. Around a 50% field goal percentage last year at Hofstra. So I just think the overall fit of what Wisconsin tried to do here, Greg, fits exactly what they are. And I think the reason Wisconsin has had success for as long as they've had success is they've understood that their culture is the most important thing. And yes, losing John Blackwell hurts. There's no question about it. But when you keep the nucleus of guys that you want to keep around, that culture stays. And I think if you were to ask any college coach, culture still matters, and culture matters a lot. And I think that's the thing that Greg and staff have really, put an emphasis with.
Yep, and I'm so glad that you mentioned Victory coming over from Hofstra, which is a great name, by the way, because Hofstra, top 5 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage over the last 2 seasons as well. And how much do you think that Wisconsin is going to put a little bit more of an emphasis on defense? Because last 2 seasons, we both know that the Wisconsin super-duper slow system that we all know and love hasn't been there quite as much, and it's been a little bit more of the offense. Defense took a little bit of a step back last season, and it feels like with Wisconsin, they might not have quite the same amount of offensive punch that they've had last 2 seasons, but it feels like the defense is getting better with really addressing the front line, as you mentioned.
Yeah, Greg, first we'll start offensively. Like, they've been playing fast for the last couple of years. Teams don't realize that. Nationally, people don't talk about it nearly enough. People are shocked, but this has been something that's been happening for a while. Defensively, they were not good last year. I think that's the biggest thing. But as far as why they lose in the NCAA tournament like they do, because defensively they weren't locked in nearly enough. And I think obviously there's going to be a focus on the defensive end for this Wisconsin team. I think Greg's going to go back to that a little bit more. Not that he got away from it, but this group that he had last year was not an elite defensive team. I think they focused to get some guys that can guard at the right positions, can switch, can do some really unique things on the defensive end. And because of that, it really allows this team to do different things. They're still going to play fast offensively. I still expect, Owen Foxwell to get these guys in the positions that they need to be at so that they can play super fast. He's going to do a great job of pushing the ball ahead, letting these guys attack. And I think that, to me, is ultimately what, this Wisconsin team wants to do. But defensively, yeah, they're going to be better because, well, we got on the plane with Greg after the loss, and I've never seen a coach more just absolutely kind of one of those looks of, all right, we got to fix this. Like, we were there, we had a really good team, but we knew we could either lose in the first round or make it all the way to the Final Four. And I think that happened to this team. And I think Greg's like, okay, we know we can control the defensive side. Sometimes when you lose or beat anybody, right? Like, this was a Wisconsin team that beat Illinois, beat Michigan, should have beat Michigan in the Big Ten tournament, beat Purdue. Like, the amount of teams that they beat Illinois at Illinois, like, was extremely high. But the losses were ones where you don't make shots and you don't guard at an elite level. Now you set yourself up to lose those type of games. So defensively, definitely will be a focus for him.
No question about it. As we do have Brian Butch, he does such a great job over at the Big Ten Network, Fox Sports, and so much more joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I think this is really interesting when it comes to the Big Ten, because I think that it's fair to say, as much as we'd love to put Wisconsin number 1 in the preseason in the Big Ten, hard to do so when you've got the likes of the 2 Michigan schools and Illinois out there. And this is just personally my observation. I want to get your thoughts on this as well. Feels like the Big Ten is a little bit more top heavy right now than it's been over the past few seasons, because I look at those 2 Michigan schools along with Illinois, it feels like they're head and shoulders above everyone else. And then I feel like there's a big giant tier 2 like Indiana I have to put in there because they spent a lot of money, but it's a sight unseen situation. Obviously, a team like in Ohio State, Wisconsin, UCLA, I have those teams over there. And then I have a team like a Maryland as a big question mark because I love what they did in the offseason. Obviously, we know that Buzz Williams has a lot of affinity for the Midwest with him coaching at Marquette a very long time ago. I think that'll get things back online there, but I really do feel like there's a big 3 in the Big Ten right now, and everyone else is trying to play a little bit catch up.
Yeah, I think that's as we sit here and do this June 20th. Yeah, for sure. I think middle of June we do this. I think it's easy to say that. I think as we get going, I don't think it's going to be as top heavy as what everybody says. I'm with you. I'm intrigued with Indiana. As far as what they have with Burton from Notre Dame and Villanova, like all that stuff that is there. They spent a lot. They're going to go get a lot of guys. Does that come together? That's my question. Same thing with USC. I think USC is a team that, obviously has a chance to really do some unique things. Ohio State and what they've done, I think there's some possibility there. You mentioned UCLA. The one that is always intriguing to me is Purdue. Yes, they have some guys coming in, but most of that nucleus is the same. Purdue and Michigan State, as far as the nucleus goes, I think there's a strong value in that. I really do. And I think that is going to help that Purdue team. I think the biggest team for me, Greg, that I have as question mark is what's Iowa going to be? Because Iowa's a team that was 10-10 last year in Big Ten play. They lose Bennett Sturts. And then what is next? I think that's a team that is so intriguing to me as far as what is ahead. The other team that's really intriguing is Minnesota. And as a Wisconsin guy, that's tough to say. But what Nico did in that first season with so many injuries, and then the pieces that he's kind of added, I just think that Minnesota has a possibility to be a really good team in this league. And I think that's the interesting piece about this. You kind of go through the whole league right now. You know, Rutgers, what do they do? Penn State, Northwestern, Washington, they're kind of brand new rosters. I think that's a tough ask to turn it completely. But to me, I think Minnesota's that team that is a surprise team. I think Iowa right now probably is a little bit overrated. They're going off of that Elite Eight run. I think there's a lot of people that are going to expect a lot of things. So those are kind of two teams that stick out to me as far as one that surprises me, and then one that I look at and say, okay, where are they at? I do love Michigan State. I think having a nucleus back, adding a couple of pieces here and there, the culture of Michigan State is why Michigan State has been so good for so long. And it's very tough to teach culture. The best way to teach culture is to have players that are in it. And that's exactly what they've done. They've kept those players. So even though, like I said, I like USC, I like Indiana, man, there's a lot of gelling that has to happen in those teams. There's a lot of things that have to go right. There's a lot of egos that have to take a seat back for the next guy. There's so many things that need to be figured out for that to work that I do question that early on. And like I said, we're having this conversation in summer. Could it change when we get to December? Could I sit here and have this conversation with you again and say, man, Indiana's figured it out. Like, talent's going to win, and they've figured out how they can gel and how they can play. Probably. Like, I lean towards that with Indiana, but I'm not sure right now. I've got to see it with my own eyes. It's great to have a lot of talent on the paper, but I got to see how quickly they can come together, because the other side of this is when you're paying college kids a lot of money, they all think they're the guy. And they're not all the guy. That's the reality of this. So I'm really intrigued as this season unfolds. But those are kind of some of the things that pop out at me here in the middle of summer.
Yep, and I always have a saying of fat and happy when it comes to these guys that they get paid a whole bunch of money. So I'm right there with you as well. And then on the flip side, I want to ask Brian about this. There's one team in the Big Ten that had a big run last season that we have yet to talk about, Nebraska. How are they going to be without Rick Mass? I've got a few question marks there, and then we'll open it up. Which team does Brian think is flying a little bit under the radar? I have to talk a little bit about the great coaching in the Big Ten as well. We'll do that on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Brian Butch. He does such an excellent job with Butch's Den. That's a new little YouTube show / podcast that he's doing. He's over there at Fox Sports. He's over there at the Big Ten Network. So much more. Doing an amazing job looking at this great sport of college basketball. Easy enough to follow him on the old Twitter /X at his first name Brian and _ last name Butch, and then the number 32 all together. And Brian, we've taken a look at got a lot of teams out there in the Big Ten. Many of them had great years last year. There are a few teams that we got question marks on. Here's one team that we have yet to talk about, though. That would be Nebraska. Nebraska was one of the biggest shocks. Forget the Big Ten out there in all of college basketball. They started out 20-0. I have a fear that the rink mass loss is just going to be so big, though, because we saw the one year that they didn't have him versus getting him back, and it was a night and day difference. A guy that we know from his time in the state of Wisconsin, Connor Essegian, what are they going to get from him as he's coming off of injury? Because I always had a saying with Connor Essegian when he was at Wisconsin, you either got really good Connor Essegian or you got really bad Connor Essegian. There was no in the middle Connor Essegian, so can he give this team a little bit more consistency? And I think that that's a team of intrigue as well, because we know what Price Sanford is going to do. Frager off the bench was a really nice sixth man. What are they going to be able to get down low without having mass, though?
Yeah, and I think that's the question, because when you have an elite big, and that's probably one of the reasons we haven't talked about it, when you have an elite big, what that leads to is more space on the floor. And because Nebraska, as I look at their roster, I don't think they have that elite big anymore. They have guys that are serviceable. They have guys that are going to be able to do some different things. But in general, I look at this group and say, okay, where are you going to get this from? Who's going to be the guy to step up and really take care of it? That, to me, is a huge thing, because ultimately, if you don't have a big, in the way that Nebraska plays, with the big kind of being a point center more or less on top on that three-point line and creating the dribble handoffs and creating those sorts of actions, if you don't have a big that you have to go out there and guard purposefully and with a solid intent of what you're trying to guard, and you can give a little space, that takes away a space from the shooter. So that is an area that I do look at with this team. Yes, you like at Sanford, that's Frager. Like, those guys are there. But where does that anchor come? Rink mass was that anchor for this Nebraska team. The other thing of it is Sam Hoiberg. And I just think that's one that I look at as he was the heart and soul of that team. Where do you get that pulse yet again?
Yep, I'm right there with you. With Hoiberg, he was able to do a nice job of just being a little bit of that stopper, being a nice glue guy, and sometimes those guys go a little bit under the radars. We're being joined here by Brian Butch right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Brian, we've taken a nice look at the Big Ten, some of the teams that we're feeling good about, what have you, and I want to throw this out here just to keep it a little bit more open-ended. It can be a Big Ten team, but is there a team or two that just on the landscape, as you take a look at this offseason, you feel like is going under the radar? We're just not talking about them enough right now.
Obviously, as this unfolds, there's some of them. For me, I think obviously Michigan State's going to be talked about. Illinois is going to be talked about. But I am going to keep it more a little bit here. And Indiana's talked about because of what they've done. I'm going to keep it more in Big Ten with this team. But I think it's a team that's really intriguing. And I brought them up once before. And it's Purdue. This is a group that lost Braden Smith, that lost Fletcher Lawyer, that lost TKR. But towards the end there, and yes, they made a run in the tournament a little bit. And they made that run because they had that experience. But I just thought at times that Matt wanted to coach his team up a little bit differently. And with the experience that they had, sometimes you have a coach that's an elite coach, but he's still not listened to. And those guys had been with him for so long. I just think Matt Painter is one of the best coaches in America. And having guys be back, be a part of it, still understanding, still now know that, like, hey, those guys are gone. It's my turn. I think that's one that's very, very intriguing to me when I look at kind of the Big Ten in general, because I just think, and maybe it's because I have so much respect for Matt Painter, I think that's part of what I look at this and say, okay, like, the guy's been an elite coach for so long, and he's done it with so many different guys and so many different things that I think, to me, that's a name that I look at and really say, okay, they could put this thing together quickly. And it's one that isn't talked about nearly enough. I don't think people are expecting a lot of things, but I also think that fits Matt Painter. I think that fits what they've tried to do from the beginning. So to me, that's one that I look at and say, okay, they're spot on as far as a team that fits that a little bit. I know other than that, a lot of teams are getting talked about. We know Florida. We know those teams. We know USC, Michigan State. But if I would just kind of keep it within the Big Ten, that's one that I would just say, hey, keep an eye out for them. Just because they do, like, really tough place to play, and the traditions there, right? Like, and these guys know exactly what they're trying to do.
And I'm so glad that you bring that up as well, because I feel like one hallmark of what we've been mentioning here in the offseason has been just great coaching in the Big Ten. Because you mentioned it with Nico Medved. I thought that was an amazing hire for Minnesota last season. Obviously, the Ben McCollum hire. I'm sure that we can both agree that is turning out very, very well for Iowa. And that's one thing I look at for the Big Ten, because while I would argue that they haven't made the same amount of splash, shall we say, signings of some of these schools out there in the Big 12 and the SEC, I feel like the Big Ten, time and time again, whenever a job opening comes available, they do a great job in terms of landing that top guy. And I think that that's why the Big Ten has so many teams that right now, maybe they're not like top 5, top 10 teams aside from the Michigan schools and Illinois, but I think when it's all said and done, there are going to be a lot of teams hovering right around that 25 to 35 range and still make the NCAA tournament.
I completely agree with that, and I'd challenge this to everybody out there that says the Big Ten isn't that. How did they do in the NCAA tournament this year? Like, I think that, like, and I know that's one where, like, if you're a Big Ten fan, you couldn't use that over the last couple of years, but, like, you had Iowa do that. You had Illinois do what they did. You had Michigan obviously win it. You had Purdue make it. Like, you had so many Big Ten teams, Nebraska, right? Like, get to the Sweet 16. You had so many Big Ten teams that really put it together that I just think when I look at this, the league is in really good hands. There's really good coaches. You know, we talked about Maryland. Like, we know what Buzz can do. We know where Buzz is at as far as what he's going to do. They're not going to have a year like they did last year. Like, so that's going to be another one that you look at and you say, okay, there's another team. That is one you have to try to figure out. And then here's the wild card with the Big Ten too, Greg, when you look at this. Have the West Coast schools figured out how to come across and travel? Have they looked into that more and more? Now it's not, the second year of doing it. Now they've got a couple of years underneath their belt as far as what they can do. I think UCLA's roster looks really good. So obviously talent helps that. We've seen that on the women's side with UCLA women and what they've been able to do. But I like what UCLA has in front of them too. And so can they figure out that travel aspect, those 4 teams that have to come and make that travel a little bit more? I would lean towards yes. I like UCLA. I like USC. I think both those teams stack up well. We know Washington kind of pulled back a little bit from where they were last year, but they've added a couple pieces, or same kind of concept with Oregon. There's a lot of pieces that need to fit there, but just in general, that's kind of some of the stuff that I look at.
Yep, I'm right there with you, and I think that it's going to be a fun season out there in the Big Ten. We both know this. It's going to be hard to win on the road. That's the way that it always is in the Big Ten. And Brian, I know that you're doing a great job getting set for the upcoming season. I know that you're doing a great job with your own podcast venture and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, the biggest thing is at Brian_Butch. It's a place you can follow Butchie's Den on YouTube. We're putting clips out there all the time, having a chance to talk with almost all the Wisconsin players, which has been fun, but doing different things with it. So best way to follow is look for Butchie's Den on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Obviously, hit that like button. We know how that all goes. Everyone's got one, but we do appreciate it when it happens. So it's fun, and we get to do it. I get to do it kind of my way, which is always great.
Yep, it absolutely is. Having full control of your own podcast is always a lot of fun. And Brian, such a wealth of knowledge, a man that has been in the game for a very long time, knows all about the great Midwest area, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insights. So big thanks to Brian for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we're up to over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast, so you can very much be on the lookout for more and more podcasts as the offseason goes along. All of these great guests. We're going to try to get as many as humanly possible. You're going to be getting a specialized conference preview podcast for every single conference as well. We're already through 3 of them. Expect the Big South and the Big West next week. That's on the radar for myself. I'm trying to make this the most successful season ever. As I always like to say, bets are won during the season. They're done through great prep work here in the offseason, so we're putting in the work, and then once it comes back to the season, we're going to be getting you guys picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.